though we're running on your computer. Before we get to that, though, I want to do a little bit of a brief introduction of just sort of VS Code in general, just so everybody's on the same playing field. In case you're not familiar, VS Code is basically a general purpose text editor made by Microsoft. It's got a strong focus on facilitating programming tasks, especially with JavaScript and Python. It can do pretty much any language as long as you can find a language extension. It's built on top of Electron and written in JavaScript, so it's portable. You can use it on just about any operating system, the 3 major operating systems. And it can be displayed directly in a browser, which we're going to use later when we get to Robbie's part, which is super awesome. You guys are going to love it. It's also highly extensible, and there's a large collection of extensions available through the Visual Studio Marketplace. A lot of those are open source on GitHub, some are closed source, and we'll see how that interacts with some of our options a little bit.
And installing VS Code on different OSs is pretty straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very simple. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the basic features so we're all kind of familiar with it. If you've never used it before, I recommend it. It's really a treat to use. It's my favorite go-to thing for just about any language. I still use Visual Studio on Windows for C++ type programs, but everything else I'm using VS Code for. Okay, so I'm just going to open a folder I created specifically for this. So I created a repo, and we can just open this here. So you can see I've got this very documentation I wrote for this purpose right here, right? And so we have a markdown file, and over here we have this preview of the markdown file, which is super awesome. And you can see if we go over to the left into this Hello World folder, I've got Hello World in a whole bunch of different languages. And you can see it recognizes all the languages just by the extension. So if we go into CPP, right, it does code highlighting, syntax and stuff. If we go into Python, for example, right, code highlighting and syntax. We can also, sort of the main go-to thing for Visual Studio Code is the command palette. So if I press Control-Shift-P, it opens the command palette. And then from there, I can do things like git clone, right? And I can press Enter, and I can provide a repository URL, right, from say GitHub or from GitLab. And there are even extensions to integrate GitHub and GitLab, so I can just clone directly from GitHub, right? And it's going to sign in and so forth. I'm not going to do that right now, but there's a lot of integration with all these wonderful tools and this wonderful ecosystem that's been built up over the last couple of decades. We can also, I'm showing you, of course, how to navigate the file system, open files. We've got editor windows with highlighting and everything. There's also IntelliSense and autocomplete. And with Python especially, so this is, I really love about Python is it knows how to integrate with Conda or Anaconda natively. And this works on Chiha too, we'll see later. So right now it's asking me to select a Python interpreter. So it's using base Python right now. But if I click here, I can scroll down and I can find any number of my environments that I have on my machine, and I can pick one. I don't have any now, but we can go ahead. I mean, you all know how to create one. I'm going to show you just as a reminder really quick. I can press Control backtick, and it'll open this terminal window. That can also be done from the menus, right? You can say open new terminal. Once I've got a new terminal window, of course, I can, of course, I have to activate Conda first. So let's pick the base environment. It's a Windows machine, so bear with me. It's not, I don't have a bash RC or anything. So, all right, so if we close this one, open a new one, you'll notice it automatically activated Conda for us. Right, and it'll do that on Chiha too, which is excellent. So you can do Conda and create name. And if you've done this before, it should be pretty familiar. File. Oops. .yml. So I'll show you, we've got that file right here, right? And so it's going to create this environment. All right, so bear with me while it creates that. So you'll notice it also has like, it's got lots and lots of built-in language dependencies or language servers. So for code highlighting and syntax and all that stuff. If it doesn't have one you're familiar with and need to use, you can check out the extension marketplace. Chances are they've got it. Almost done there. So once we've created this environment, I'm going to show you how we can, just kind of showing you how this workflow works. So right now we're on the base environment. Once this is done installing, we'll be able to reload the window and then switch to it. So I'll show you that in just a second. All right, so you'll notice it doesn't actually show up in here. Our test env should be Python 3.85, so it should be down here at the bottom. They're in alphabetical order. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Control-Shift-P. We're going to say reload the window. See, that's that first command there. If I'm going too fast, you just feel free to step in and slow me down. All right, so we reloaded the window. So give it a second to load up all the extensions again. I go to Python. Just 1 second. Have this in the way. There we go. There we go. Now it's loaded the Python extension since we opened a Python file. So we go down, we can find it. Yeah, it may take a second for it to recognize that it's there. I've noticed it takes a second to kind of, yep, see, there it is, test env. So if we click that, I've got it loaded. And all of the IntelliSense and stuff. So if we imported a package like pandas and we don't have it in the current one, it will show up as not available. Oh, that may be in the base package though. I don't know that I have one that'll show you it, but we could say, oops. Ravi, do you know a package that definitely won't import? You think of anything?
Streamlit.
Oh yeah, good one. Okay, yeah, see, so it doesn't know about Streamlit, right? Because we don't have it. But if we were to have an environment where Streamlit was available, for example, then it would show up without the red underline. So it's got all this IntelliSense, right? It knows what packages are available on your machine in your current environment, and it tells you, hey, I don't know what that is, or I do know what that is. So if we were to go to say pd.dataframe, we can hover over that. Oh, well, no, it doesn't know what that is. Wow, it's not being very helpful today. That's unfortunate. Okay, let's switch back from base to testing. Give it a second. Give you data frame. Okay, it's not being very helpful today. I don't know why it's not being helpful, but oh, it's still analyzing. Yeah, sometimes it gets stuck analyzing. It's unfortunate. It may take a bit. I'm not going to hold up the thing for that, but once it's done analyzing all of the files, what it's doing is it's gathering up all the doc strings and everything. So when you hover over a method or you start typing a method, it'll show you a little helpful tooltip here. If you wait just a second, that'll show you, what args can be passed to that function, what they all mean, etc. If such a help string is available. It'll even, if you use typing, the typing library in Python, import typing, then it'll also show you all the type hints as well, which can be really helpful if you're doing that. Okay. Oh yeah, and there's a helpful hint. It's saying your auto formatter is not installed. Do you want to install it? So we can say yes, and then it'll just install it for me automatically with this. I prefer black, but other people might have other things. So I have it set up so that whenever I save my file, it automatically formats the file so that everything I write is consistently formatted. But these are more advanced topics. We'll come back to that maybe another time. Okay. So I feel like that's a decent overview of what's going on with Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to show you now how we can do remote development. So if I click this little icon down here, it says open a remote window, right? It opens up a list. Well, I guess I'll show you the extension first. So if we do remote development, right? It contains the remote Windows subsystem for Linux, remote containers, and remote SSH. SSH is the one we're most interested in. But if you do a lot of development with containers, you can use the remote containers to attach to them dynamically using Visual Studio Code, which is also pretty awesome. And it's like developing in a container on your main machine, on whatever machine it is. But we're going to be working with remote SSH today. So I'm going to click down here again. We're going to go to remote SSH, connect to host. And I have one configured. You can configure a new one or add a new SSH host, but I already have Chiha configured. We can show you how to do that later if you're interested. It's not any different than configuring an SSH host on Linux, for example. All right, so it's going to open up a new window. Of course, I have to type in my password, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, just in case. I typed into the wrong place or something. I'm going to share it again once you've done that. All right. Yep. And so now you'll notice this icon now has SSH:chiha. So it says we're on Chiha. So now if I say open folder, it's going to put me in my home directory on Chiha. So I can do the user. Right. Keep on the repos. Right. And I can pick any one of these and open it. Oops. But I don't have that repo I just had, so I'm going to go ahead and clone it. We're gonna grab the URL 1 second.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people are already familiar with the code editor and the remote development in it. So what William is showing over here is basically this code editor is running on his local machine. It's not running on Chiha, but with this remote package that Microsoft provides, he can directly SSH into Chiha and access the files over there and use that and edit those files based on some of these environments that are available on Chiha.
It's almost like using remote desktop or VNC, except it uses a server client model. And what I mean by that is we're essentially running this hyper specialized browser window called Visual Studio Code to communicate with a server that's on Chiha. And it's essentially like seamlessly having this local Visual Studio Code window running on Chiha, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so that leaves this code editor for you to work on the local things that you have on your system, and just with I mean, not the click of a button over here, but you can definitely set up your SSH files in such a way that it's just click of a button and you go to your remote session.
Oh no. We're having the Git problem. I guess I'll maybe show them a different repo. That's unfortunate.
That always happens in live demos.
Of course it does. Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm gonna see what ones I can show you. Let's see what one is reasonable. I'll just show you my personal one. 1 second. There we are. This is one from my PhD project, so I'm just going to pull that up. So if we open that, now it's going to, the way I have it set up, it opens a new window. So now this window is connected by SSH to the folder on Chiha containing this repository. Right, and so I can open up.
Yeah, and if you can see the terminal window that William has down below, you'll see a familiar sight of the Chiha login prompt.
Exactly. And so let me pull up just a file here. I gotta remember my own repo. I haven't touched this thing in a while. So examples. I'm not gonna run it. I mean, it's MATLAB, so I'm not gonna run anything. I have a MATLAB language server, so it also formats everything or auto colors everything. So anyway, it's just, you can pull up files on Chiha as though they were on your local machine, and you can edit them, you can save them. A lot of your settings transfer over. So like my auto save setting, my auto formatting setting, all that's just like it would be on my normal on my local machine. One difference is the extensions, right? This is what's installed on Chiha, and this is what's installed locally. So I have all of them installed on Chiha, but if one's missing, it'll give you the option to install it onto Chiha as well as local. Now, some run locally, like the formatting type stuff, because that's happening locally, but other ones will run remotely. Which leads me into an important point, is that everything in remote dev is currently running on the login node. And right now, we don't have a good way to get the remote dev extension to run in a job context. So if you were to say use the debugger, it would open up a debugging server on the login node and consume login node resources. So if you're going to use remote dev extension, make sure you keep it to light stuff, code editing, formatting, things like that. Don't try to run complex applications or debug them using the remote dev. When we get to Ravi's, we'll show you an alternative way that is in a job context, but it takes a little bit more setup. But I can also, of course, I have an alias for, right? I can do S interactive, for example, in this terminal window, and it's going to say waiting for job ID to start. And once it starts, we can, of course, put this terminal window into a job context, which eventually will happen. I guess maybe Chiha's on working pretty well. Pretty loaded up. That's good. Okay, so we've got a job context here, but this job context, of course, is only for this terminal window. It does not apply to everything else. So it's still the case that if I were to say run a debugger, it'd be running on the login node rather than in this particular job context. So before we switch over, do we want to switch over to yours? Do we want to take questions now and then switch, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah, we can let people know. I mean, if you guys have any questions for William, William is our expert on VS Code, so feel free to ask any question.
That was pretty information dense, I'm sure. If you're familiar with VS Code, it probably was. There was probably not a lot of new information, but if you're not familiar with it, I know that was probably a lot. And we're happy to help you get set up on this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now or later or whenever. But this is a good way to increase your productivity if you spend a lot of time coding.
Yeah, definitely. VS Code has helped me a lot in my coding work. It's basically reduces the work, and some of the things that William was using, like black auto formatter that keeps your, at least the Python scripts, I mean, that's what it is built for, black. But the auto formatter keeps your code in the correct, what's that called? PEP8 context.
The PEP8 format. Well, there's and with a few stylistic choices, but it tries to be as agnostic as possible. There's other formatters too. Black just happens to be my favorite.
Yeah, and yeah, so all this thing actually helps in the auto completion, the code highlighting, and letting you know where you might be wrong. All of those things actually, I mean, VS Code is a tool. You can write this entire thing and do all those things just in a terminal with a Vim. But it's kind of an IDE. So the purpose of IDE is to aid you in writing your programs faster and more efficiently, and making you concentrate more on the logic of the program rather than the formatting and
getting the tool chain to work and everything.
Yeah. So they try to keep your focus more on the logic of the thing that you're writing rather than just worry about these other things.
Right, because back in the old days, you'd have to write your file and then run it through the formatter and then run it through the linter and then examine all the output and then go back. All right, it closes that loop. So now it's much faster. It's all, right, instantaneous on the fly. So
yeah, I mean, all these things are really awesome. I mean, I remember my early coding days, and I was in C++, and I invariably always forgot the semicolon somewhere to end the command, and then I would spend half a day just looking for that one semicolon.
Yeah,
exactly. This IDEs, VS Code in particular, it's one of the most popular editors or IDEs out there. I think it has a really nice users rate amongst developers. So yeah, definitely if you guys are not using VS Code, give it a try and see how you guys feel about using it.
And in case you're on the fence because you're a free and open source type user, VS Code itself is open source. All of Microsoft's extensions are open source, with the exception of the server that is running on Chiha right now. That specific server is closed source. Technically, the source is available in the remote dev repo, but it's, you're not supposed to play with it. It's closed source license. So,
yeah, and that's a nice transition for the next section of our talk. It's basically using sandboxing and how we can use the open source version that William was just talking about. Or we have an app that uses the open source portion of the VS Code plus the open source extensions that are available, and displays them in sort of a way that you can use it directly in a job context on Chiha. So let me start my screen sharing. All right, so we'll begin with first creating a sandbox or dev environment for you guys on the on-demand interface. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with this interface now at rc.uab.edu. everything should look familiar to you apart from this uh, develop tab that you see over here. Most of you won't have it unless and until you have set up the sandboxing portions on the on-demand. So let's start with that. Let's start with creating a sandbox environment. Uh, Let me post this link in the chat. All right, you should see this docs, our wiki page for Open On-Demand Sandbox up in the chat now. So first thing that we are going to do is set up Sandbox for your profile. I already have this thing, but if you're doing it for the first time, just go to your on-demand page, click on Chi clusters and Chiha shell access. And this will take some time. But yeah, till the time, it's as simple as making this dev folder in your user data / on-demand folder. So there is an on-demand folder in your user data, that's data / user / Blazor ID. And there would be an on-demand folder inside there. And inside there, you just need to create this dev folder. And if you don't want to go in there and do, you can just copy this command that's going to create this dev folder for you. Once you have created this folder, it's as simple as going to the Chiha on demand, that's this page, and go under help and click on restart web server. As soon as you click on restart web server, you should see this new tab that has come in, the develop tab. And so now, since you have created a sandbox or dev environment for you guys, we have a couple of examples of how you can build your first dev apps. We have IGV and FSL as examples. You can just follow these steps under develop tab, click on my sandbox apps. I already have these apps set up, so I don't really need to do, I really don't want to do that again, but we'll do the code server part on our own. But it's simply basically you click on my sandbox apps development. You'll see I already have the FSL and IGV and ParaView running as dev apps. You click on new app. You click on clone existing app. Then that would get you to this stage, clone existing app. Then you give this directory name and this git remote. And we have kept these repos as public. It's a sandbox app template. And that gives you the entire template for a GUI application that you would have. Apart from, and once you have cloned that repo, you just need to make a few changes. So you need to change something in manifest.yaml. So you need to change the software name and software link variables that have been defined over there to proper things. So software name would change to IGV. Software link would change to whatever is the software link for IGV. Then you edit the form.yaml file and you uncomment this portion from that sandbox app template and just make IGV version. Take a look at the module that's available on Chiha for whichever software you're looking for. And then just define the first one would be kind of name of the module file. And the second one would be so once you do module load this, so whatever is the entire module thing that you do for loading that module, you just copy that over here. That basically means you'll have a selection choice in the form that comes in, and you will see this portion. But once you select this portion, this version or this module is getting loaded for your app. And in the template, and once you, after that, you go to the templates folder and script.sh.erb, and then just type in these commands at the end, which you generally use for running that GUI job. So generally, if you're in the HPC desktop, what you'll do is you'll do module load IGV /2.5.0 / dash something, and then once you have loaded that module, you are going to run igv-tools_gui.command or igv.sh. But so whatever is the command that you need to actually start up that GUI process, that's the thing that goes at the end of script.sh.erb. And that's how you just set up your Sandbox app. It's a similar case for FSL, but you'll just see subtle changes. Like rather than IGV, you are using FSL, and the location for FSL or the web address for FSL, you'll see that it's a different module that you're loading over here, and you're using different commands to actually start up the GUI portion of FSL. What that allows you to do is it allows you to create a shortcut directly from on-demand apps rather than going through HPC desktop and doing all those things. You can just ask for a job that's valid with this environment. So you guys have all these two apps to play around with, and other GUI apps that are available on Jira, which you can change based on the instructions over here. Just make it more appropriate for the software that you are using. The thing that we are going to be going to run right now is code server. I already have code server, so I'm going to remove this. All right, and let's go into my interactive sessions. So you see, I just have FSL, IGV, and ParaView. These are my Sandbox apps. So that means I need to create a new Sandbox app. So I'll follow the same process. My Sandbox apps, new app, clone existing app. And rather than using the Sandbox, we did set up a separate repo for code server. Let me add that as well. Let me send that in the chat as well. And so, all right, let's go back to the dashboard. We have come to here. Once you go over here, it's again a public app, so you guys should be able to go over here, copy this git clone repo, I'm going to again give it vs_code, and the git remote would be the HTTP link that you copied from the GitHub repo. If you want to, you can also create a new Git project from this. That basically means it's just going to remove the entire history and it will start up as a new Git project. So if you wanted to make changes, so for instance, with the Sandbox app template that we were using for FSL and IGV, rather than using just the template, you wanted to create your own Git repos where you can have different Git repos for different apps that you use in your profile. So rather than having to go and making those changes manually, you can just clone the repo and be done with it with all the changes in place. You can do that. You can just create a new Git repo from this project from this file and then just push to the new remote wherever you want to set up your, I guess, Sandbox apps. I am just going to leave it as is right now. And you submit it. What it basically does in the background is it takes this Git remote and clones it with the name that you have specified with VS Code. You can edit metadata, so basically code server and all these things that you see, but we have already changed these things for this repo. You can launch your code server directly from here, but we'll just go to interactives, my interactive sessions, and you'll see in interactive apps, there is a code server right here now. Click on code server. This was the only version that's available on Chiha. This was the latest one, or a couple of months old version of VS Code. I'm just going to ask for 1 hour or 2 hour express, and this should be enough. You can select the project directory. That's where your VS Code is going to start. So right now it's in tutorial parallelism. I'll just keep it as data user Ravi 89. All right. So we have submitted the job. You guys must be familiar with the form, the entire thing. So everything remains the same, and it should just start now. And this code server has all the open source version that we were talking about earlier. It has all the open source portions of VS Code and the open source extensions. It would not have all the latest extensions available, but if you are using some extensions that are closed source, those things wouldn't be available, but everything else should be there. And you'll see, since I opened it in the data user Ravi89 location, it gives me all the folders, which is not really generally what you want. But once you have created a project, you can always just directly open into that project. I never want this big of a project there where I have my entire data user location. And if you take a look, you'll see that this looks exactly similar to the VS Code that William was working on. Some of the changes are that it is running as a job on Chiha.
Open it. If you open it, what happens if you open a terminal window?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I have terminal installed or not.
Oh, I see. Okay. Does it not? Wait, does it not have the stock terminal or?
No, not by default. It's so for. All right.
Gotcha.
Oh, what was the control command P?
Control Shift P.
Oh.
Or just put a right caret into that bar.
Yeah, terminal should be here. Oh, it's here now.
There it is.
All right, so now you'll see that it has the job has started on C0135 and it has so now the entire code server is running in a job context. You also get this portion that in the web server, you'll see this plus sign, install code server. What that basically allows is it brings out this VS Code from your Google Chrome settings and just brings that thing out. Just keep in mind, since it is running in job context, it's always, unless and until your setting is C0135 and 554194 port, which you don't have a control over. If it changes even slightly, this is not going to work like previously. You'll always have to install a new code server. But I'll just show you how it looks like. So once you install it, and this is running again on that C00135, but it's not attached to Chrome. It has been moved out and it's like you're running an app directly on your Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's basically it. You can find all the extensions over here. You have all the settings that William already showed you previously. With Git, you can open files. You have this Python virtual environments,
which it finds just fine on your on Jihad. It knows where to look and everything. So.
Yeah, it knows how to look for the Conda environments as well. So you'll see it finds all the Conda environments that it should be looking for, and yeah, and that's basically it. Do you guys? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say just for the purpose of discussion, I suppose. We've covered two different methods of accessing it. One, the one that Ravi showed, is probably the one you should prefer because it's a little bit safer in the sense that it's always running in a job context. So anything you do is going to run in that context. Remote dev's a little bit more unsafe, a little bit less user-friendly in the sense that whatever you do doesn't run in a job context. It runs on the login node. So it's easier to accidentally break things if you're not sure what you're doing. So I would say especially if you're new to VS Code and want to play around with it on Chiha, I would definitely go with Ravi's route first, the sandboxing this. And if you need help setting it up, feel free to shoot us an email or a ticket or come to office hours and we can help you get set up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, did anybody try setting up the sandbox with code server while we were discussing it? Or if not, I mean, feel free to try it out on your own and send us an email or the office hours where we can discuss how you guys can set up your own sandbox apps. And yeah, that's basically it. So for instance, if I think IGB is already available globally, but just leaving aside code server, if you use FSL on a regular basis, what you can do is you can set up your sandbox app, and then once you have set the sandbox app, it's basically as easy as using any of the other interactive apps like MATLAB, SAS, ANSYS, and you just need to click on launch, and yeah, you were right. Chia seems to be busy today.
Yeah. Not a bad problem to have, right?
So. Yes. All right. Yeah. It should start soon.
We hope.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, and as soon as you click on it, you'll see that the FSL job has started and you have all the options with FSL that you generally have, and you can just use it. You do also get terminal and web browser, but nothing else in this context, and the file manager, and just the software that you have loaded. As soon as you close,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
As soon as you close this, the job ends. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, you'll notice it looked a little different than with VS Code, and the reason for that is that VS Code is written in JavaScript, running on Electron, so it knows how to run directly in a browser window. That's one of the benefits of the way they developed it, is that it's really, really portable. The other apps aren't necessarily going to do that because they don't have a server-client model, so we're just kind of running them in an Xterm kind of thing, or a VNC kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, VS Code is going to be a little snappier than some of the other apps.
Yeah. The other advantage of using that Xterm is that any GUI app that you can think of, anything that you were using with HPC desktop, you should be able to create a sandbox app for it.
So Ravi, Tarun asked a really great question. What about Streamlit apps where we don't have a module on Chiha? How would we run that this way?
Oh, so Streamlit app that don't have modules. That basically just a package, right?
Well, I may have to ask Tarun to clarify. Tarun, do you want to clarify for Ravi what you mean? You can unmute if you want and just ask directly. Tarun, are you there?
Hey, yeah.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Okay. I know I tend to lose track of my unmute button sometimes.
So my question was, when trying to create a sandbox app, what if there is no module for a certain app, let's say Streamlit? What to do in that case?
Oh, so do you want to launch the Streamlit app using the sandbox app?
Yes.
That's cool. That's a good question. That'll help us too to know how to do that.
Yeah, that is something that we haven't completely thought of as well. So basically how all the other apps are working over here is that, so either you create a connection directly from the port wherever the Streamlit app is running and make a connection with the on-demand interface where it can just show a button and be like, once you click on this, it will go to this compute node and this port information. We haven't looked into how to completely do that. So that might be a good discussion to have, maybe
Yeah.
offline.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I'm wondering. I mean, we can talk about it offline, but I was wondering if we could do it like we do VS Code, where we set up the server on the back end and then open up a browser tab, right, and then run it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely utilize the infrastructure that some of these apps provide, whether it be Code Server or the Jupyter Notebook or the RStudio thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we can definitely utilize that infrastructure, and how we can have the Streamlit app be available as a Sandbox app as well. But yeah, that's a good discussion to have. I haven't really thought much about that. So
yeah,
that's a good.
We kind of came up with the idea back when we were first playing with Streamlit, but we didn't have any use cases for it, so it didn't really go anywhere. But I'm glad to hear that somebody outside of us has a use case for it. Maybe that'll, because I mean, it shouldn't. I mean, once we do it for one, we should be able to do it for literally any Streamlit app, right? It should all just be generic enough to handle anything. So
yeah,
that's great. I see a lot of future with that, so that's something we should probably talk about internally.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Mana has to make a tool of. Mana has a question: to make a tool available in Sandbox, are there any criteria that the tool needs to satisfy?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, like I mentioned, some of the things that you would want is like a GUI tool. So there are two types of Sandbox apps that you can deploy. They have a nice. Actually, if you go to developer documentation, there are two types of apps that you can deploy. One is the interactive apps, like for the GUI version, where you have an HPC desktop running, and on that you are just running that single software. The ones like IGV and FSL that are available. There is also this passenger apps that you can use. That's for non-GUI kind of tools, where you just have a script and you can use this passenger apps to actually deploy it. I would suggest going through these documentations. So once you have that develop tab, you should be able to just click on it and go to this tutorial passenger apps and see if you're thinking of running some scripts or bash scripts or Python script or something. I think passenger apps might be the place to go. If you're looking for GUI, we already have documentation regarding it, but you can also look at the tutorial for interactive apps for that. Does that answer your question, Mana? Or
yes, that answers the question. Thanks, Ravi and William.
Thank you.
I have another question that I put it on the chat.
Oh yeah, go ahead. You can ask a question.
Okay. This is an extension of Tarun's question. So right now for Streamlit app, I use remote SSH tunneling. So in case you could make the Sandbox available for the Streamlit app, would they have any particular advantage?
I mean, there would be just a direct connection on the on-demand, so you'll just have a thing that you can just click and you'll have your Streamlit app available. But other than that, I don't see, or at least in this short amount of time when I'm thinking of it, it might not.
So easier access.
Yeah, it might be more like a turnkey kind of solution, rather than having to configure your SSH, or what if you want to bring a new user on right now, you got to help them configure their SSH and do all this other stuff. But with this way, you just say, here, take this repo with the manifest and the form and and just go, right? And then create a job and start it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, feel free to, so we have that Sandbox app template where the 3 or 4 files that you'll need to change even for this purpose should be available. So feel free to play around with it and try to see if you can create a Streamlit connection directly to the on-demand interface. That's what Sandbox is for. Sandbox is basically like, it's your own space to make changes and play around with things and feel like if you break, you can just delete that one particular app and you'll be in I guess, a default place.
Yeah. And if you come up with anything clever, feel free to share back. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and we'll definitely discuss it on our end as well, how we can make some of these apps available with Sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you everyone for joining us for this user session. We hope it was useful for you guys. Like I mentioned in between and at the start and a lot of times in between, VS Code has been a real game changer. And I think it just makes the entire process really fast of developing something. And like I mentioned, it just keeps the focus on the logic of the things, which is where as a developer, I want my focus to be. And so definitely check it out. You can use other IDEs as well. Like if you just work with Python scripts, you can use PyCharm. PyCharm has a similar remote dev environment. We don't have any Sandbox app for it at the moment. But if you just work in Python, PyCharm is a good IDE as well. Most of these IDEs just make your life a lot easier. So don't hesitate in making use of them.
Yeah. For me, VS Code is nice because I can, if I'm working on Chiha, right, I'm writing whatever code base like Python, but I'm also writing shell scripts, right, because I've got to be able to run the job. So it's nice to be able to, in the same window, open both kinds of things and have it tell me what's wrong with both of them. So
yeah, it does allow you to switch from one language to another super easily.
Right. That's for me one of the primary benefits. Nice, consistent user experience.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.